Computing has changed our world. Prior to the advent of communication devices as we know them, people around the world communicated in very different ways than we do today. Ancient people used many different ways to communicate across long distances. These included smoke signals, drum signals, and pigeons to carry messages. Click to read more about ways that ancient people communicated over long distances. Communication has changed dramatically over time. Just ask your parents, and they will likely have stories about sharing the family phone. Very likely it was a landline with a cord. Computing has not only changed the way we communicate, the use of computers has changed almost everything about how we interact with our world, including the way we learn, the way we do business, collection of and access to information, the extensive ways we can connect to each other, and our privacy and footprint in the world. We are now in the third decade of the 2000s. Our daily lives are impacted in many ways by technology. Think about your day-to-day actions and interactions. How do you communicate with friends and family, learn about music, fashion, and products, or buy new things? Computers, tablets, and smartphones have drastically changed our lives. These are computing devices, physical artifacts that can run a program. Other examples include servers, routers, and smart sensors. Let's take a look at what has changed since your parents and grandparents were your age. Technology timeline. Note: experiences vary widely based on where and when you live in the world. While the following slides are a general picture, they do not capture the reality for everyone living in that time period. They are meant to provide a snapshot of what life was like across a 70-year period so that you can see how life has changed. Like life for current teenagers, the life of a teenager in 1950s America focused mainly on school and home. However, the world probably felt much smaller for a teenager in the 1950s. Most of what they learned about the world outside of the United States came from print media like books, newspapers, and magazines. Hanging out with friends likely meant going to the movies. Any social event was typically planned during school hours or by talking to a friend on the family's rotary phone. However, making plans wasn't as simple as picking up the phone and dialing a friend. In those days, party lines or shared telephone lines were common. A shared telephone line meant that families who lived near each other shared a telephone line. On a shared telephone line, although each phone had a specific ringtone, everyone on the line could hear your conversation if they picked up the phone, and you had to wait until the line was free to make a call. The 1950s fell within a period called the Golden Age of Hollywood, and teenagers learned about new fashion from movies. It was during the 1950s that jeans, or dungarees as they were called then, became more popular with girls. Before that, girls mostly wore skirts or dresses. It is widely believed that this came into fashion after the icon Marilyn Monroe was seen wearing them in a photo. The golden age of radio was also taking place during the 1950s. Television was just gaining in popularity, and most families listened to regular radio programs in the evenings. Aside from radio shows, music could be heard on the airwaves. Local radio DJs were the main source of new music. A brand new musical genre called rock and roll was a source of controversy. Some believed it was a bad influence on teenagers and wanted it banned. Records were popular for listening to recorded music in the 1950s. When a teenager wanted to buy something new, they often shopped at small, family-owned shops downtown. Larger towns also had department stores, which sold almost everything you needed: home goods, clothing, and even food. The five and dime was also a common place to shop for a wide range of products at a low price, often a nickel or a dime. By the 1970s, things had changed a lot for teenagers. The Vietnam War made the world seem a little smaller, as news from Asia was commonplace for teenagers of that time. This was a time of conflict, and protests were commonplace in cities and on college campuses. Many teenagers were very aware of current events and watched daily television evening news broadcasts with their families. In the 1970s, teenagers' musical taste was still mainly influenced by local radio DJs. In addition to purchasing your favorite music on records, 8-tracks were common. Unlike records, 8-tracks didn't skip when bumped, which meant that they could be played in the car. Before 8-tracks, the radio was the only music available in cars. By the 1970s, malls were popular places to shop, although mail order was still quite popular. If you found something you wanted in a paper catalog, you could send your order form away and your items would arrive in a few weeks. You could also phone in your order to the company's customer service line. Landline home phones were still the main method of telephone communication, but if you were out of the house, public payphones were available. It cost a dime to make a local phone call. Like teenagers from previous decades, teens in the 1980s were heavily influenced by their favorite musical artists. The dominant form for recorded music was the cassette tape. The Walkman, pictured below, proliferated in the 1980s. While home phone lines and payphones were still popular, new technology brought cordless home phones and the first car phones. When friends were away, teenagers regularly sent postcards or letters by mail. Pen pals were also very popular. There were organizations that linked teenagers from different countries to exchange letters. This helped teens learn about life in other parts of the world. As technology progressed, the 1990s brought the first portable cell phones. They came with a carrying bag, which was helpful for carrying the large external battery. In the mid to late 1990s, the internet became popular in many homes. By connecting a telephone line to your home's desktop computer, you could dial up to the internet. This changed the way teenagers communicated in a couple of key ways. First, when someone was online, you could not use the telephone. Second, with the internet, there were new lines of communication with your friends, like email and instant messenger. Chat rooms allowed you to talk to a group of friends or to talk with people with common interests. While public payphones were still used, pagers became popular with teenagers. Pagers allowed anyone to send you their phone number and you knew to call them back. Malls were still very common places to shop, although calling in catalog orders was still an option. One of the most popular stores for teenagers was the music store, a place where you could go to shop for your favorite music on cassette tape or the newer compact disc, CD.